January 28th. Heat waves rise like wobbly spirits off the black tarmac on the runway at Tan Son Nhat Airport outside Saigon. We flew inland about 40 miles from South China Sea following the Saigon River. The pilot pointed out all the various landmarks, and now we're here. But from the looks of things outside the air-conditioned airliner, I'm not sure I want to get off the plane. Sure enough, as soon as we step out onto the asphalt, the heat slams into me like I walked into a wall. I'm drenched by sweat by the time we trudge over to the terminal, though Mom seems oblivious. She gotten all dolled up in a pink dress, but it turns out Dad isn't even here to meet us. He sent his car and driver, a middle-aged Vietnamese guy named Han, followed by a jeep with a couple of Marines, one of them sitting in the back behind a mounted machine gun. Are we going to need that? I asked Han, surprised to see such a heavily armed escort. I thought Saigon was supposed to be safe. Do we have to fight like our way to the embassy? It's only a precaution, Han says. Holding the door open for Mom, she stops to stare at the machine gun too, obviously not pleased. The AC is cranked up as high as it will go in the car, a new Ford sedan that Han assures us is armor-plated and has bulletproof windows. I guess those are only precautions too, I say. Yes, Han says. Saigon is well protected, but all the country is a war zone. The shock back into the AC from the 100-degree heat gives me a headache. I press my hands against my temples, and I had wished we had gotten that haircut Mom had been on me about, since my long hair is now damp with humidity and matted to my forehead and the back of my neck. I think I might have to grab it and twist it to wring out all the water. Mom, who never seems to sweat no matter what, coolly adjusts her Foster Grant sunglasses and awaits like royalty while Han retrieves our luggage. Then we're off to find Dad's villa, which is near the embassy in the center of Saigon, on a street called Ta Nhat Boulevard. We only know the names because Han keeps running up the commentary from the front seat like one of those New York tour bus operators. Mom nods politely for a while and then orders him to stop at a stand to buy us Coca-Colas. And be sure they haven't already been opened, she admonishes him. Of course, he says. To me, she adds, whatever you do, be sure not to drink the water unless it's been boiled. We pass through a blur of streets and highways, some so wide they look like parking lots, others so narrow you can almost reach out and push over the tin-roofed houses and stores crowding the edges. There are old, boxy 1950 cars, most of them taxis, fighting their way through intersections and around traffic circles with no signals or police to direct things. That means bicycles and pedestrians and rickshaws and scooters and even horses and wagons are all thrown together in a crazy swirling chaos as one traffic jam bleeds into the next, with just the occasional open block where Han can shift into second gear. There are kids everywhere, running in and out of traffic, squatting in alleys, standing like zombies, splashing in puddles, or begging for pastry just inches away from our window as we nudge our way through. Some dressed in rags, some with shirts but no pants, some with nothing at all. Mom tells me not to give them anything or it will only encourage them to be bolder, she says. I'm used to seeing panhandlers in New York, but these are just kids. Helicopters flash above us, swooping over the city. American, Han says. Routine patrols. We pass a foreign dealership that only has junked cars and rusty car parts. Splash through open sewers. See a pit filled with chemical brown water and dozens of kids swimming in it. There are tarpaulin-covered stalls with cases of bottled soda stacked 10 feet high. Women crouching on sidewalks, cooking on tiny stoves, more kids sitting on blankets or towels or just sitting in the dirt, selling pyramids of Pall Mall cigarettes and cans of sardines. A giant billboard for a Jerry Lewis movie with a rendering of the comedian that makes him look dramatic or demonic. People in long dresses with slits on the sides that Han can tell us are called aduai. Girls in western miniskirts and halter tops and high heels and heavy makeup. Han catches me staring. Those are B girls, he says to my mother. It's best for the young man to stay away from them. Thank you, Mom says, throwing a warning glance at me, but I keep looking at the girls. After an hour, we enter the old French business district at the center of Saigon, or so Han tells us, where the streets are widened again, shaded by towering tamarind trees and lined with bougainvillea and red fire Ponetian. We pass the Hotel Continental, which Han says is the oldest hotel in Saigon, built by the French, of course, so it's very fancy. What isn't so fancy is the wall of standing sandbags blocking the entrance and more sandbags protecting the other government buildings. The architecture changes here. Red tile roofs, shining white columns. Most of the people we now see are Vietnamese businessmen in dress pants and long-sleeve white shirts, and an increasing number of South Vietnamese army types and American GIs. For many years, until France gave up Vietnam as a colony, Saigon was called the Paris of the East. Han, the tour guide, says, as the Continental and as its wall of sandbags disappear behind us. Mom asks about shopping, and Han points out several stores as we pass that he must think we're upscale. But judging from the sour expression on her face, my mom doesn't agree. We pass a small forest of dinosaur trees with trunks glowing out of trunks, and branches rising higher in the surrounding buildings, easily over 5 stories tall, with monkeys and birds crowding the upper reaches and small shrines decorating the ground underneath. Banyan trees, Han says. They're a species of fig tree. The figs attract the monkeys and the birds and the fruit bats you see in the branches. What's with the shrines? I asked. Those are for ancestor worship, Han says. Many of the people in South Vietnam follow the Catholic religion, but there are still many Buddhists as well. The Buddhists believe spirits live in banyan trees, so during Tet they leave gifts and sacrifices and say prayers for their ancestors. What's Tet? Mom asks. It's a local celebration of some kind. Han laughs. Not exactly. Tet is the Vietnamese New Year, which begins in 2 days, just after midnight. This coming year will be the year of the monkey. He doesn't have time to explain further because we're suddenly there pulling into Dad's gated villa, a compound with shards of glass embedded in the top of a concrete wall and a roll of concertina wire behind that, plus a guardhouse with 2 armed, scowling Vietnamese soldiers with M16s. The villa itself is 2 stories, with a veranda running all the way around the 2nd floor. Dad's basically turned his house into a heavily defended bunker. The Germans he fought in World War II would have loved the place. Han parks in a circular driveway under tall tamarind trees and ushers us inside. The military jeep with the machine gun stays out on the street. The burst of heat between the car and the villa is a little easier to deal with thanks to the shade, but the humidity is still so thick a machete would come in handy. Dad isn't home. I'm very sorry, Han says. It appears Ambassador Sorensen is still at work. He's an ambassador now? I asked. When did he get a promotion? It's just an honorary title, Taylor, my mom says as she opens her purse. Han smiles and nods. Mother tries to tip him, but he waves her off. Though perhaps you will want to leave a gratuity for the staff when you depart, he says. He sets our suitcases down in the foyer, then summons the housekeeper, the gardener, the cook, and their assistants so he can introduce them to us and explain their duties. They all nod, but mostly look at the floor. None speak. Welcome to Saigon, Han says after the introductions, and the help have retreated to their stations or duties or whatever. Let me know if you need anything. It would be nice to have my dad here to at least greet us, I say. Maybe you can give him the message? Enough with the sarcasm, Mom says. I'm sure your father is very busy. He's always very busy, I say. Han just keeps smiling. Dad and I get into it about the war half an hour after he shows up at the villa that night. So late that Mom has long since gone to bed. She must be too jet-lagged and out of her out of it to rouse herself when he pulls up with a convoy of military escort vehicles that goes zooming away into the Saigon night once he's inside. He barely says a word to me, just pours himself a nightcap and announces that we're going to have ourselves a little talk, man to man. Since we just saw each other in New York the month before over Christmas, I guess he figures he can skip the part where the absent parent tells his kid how much he missed him and just get right to the lecturing. With no choice, I follow Dad into his study, which is a mess of papers and files and books and magazines and documents and a desk buried under there somewhere. A ceiling fan turns in slow motion, hardly moving the stagnant air. He kicks back in a recliner. I'm left with a straight-back chair against the wall. Your mother tells me you've been sneaking out, going to clubs, thinking you're some kind of hot shot, he said, pulling a cigar out of a silver box on a lampstand next to his chair. He rolls the cigar between his fingers, sniffs it, then clips it off at the end. He fires up his cigar and lets out a steam of smoke. I cough for what seems like 5 minutes and feel dizzy afterwards. He tilts his head back and blows smoke rings up at the ceiling fan. So what about it, hot shot? He asks. Got anything to say for yourself? What's there to say? I respond. Mom already pulled me out of school. Said you guys might not send me back. That's about it. I think he'll get angry about me so flipping, but he lets it go. Just keeps blowing those smoke rings, some of which manage to shoot between the fan blades. He sips his drink, looks at it, then down the rest in one gulp. So how about the war, Dad? I say, angry that he doesn't even seem to care enough to respond. How's that going lately? You got this thing won yet? Just about ready to wrap things up? Turn off the light at the end of the tunnel and send everybody home? His dad fixes his gaze on me and holds it there, jaw clenched, until I look away, already regretting the sarcasm. Why do I have to be such an idiot all the time? Most people are afraid of my dad because of his size and temper and because he's always right and wants to make sure everybody knows it. He crosses one leg over the other, stubs out his cigar on the bottom of his shoe, lets the ashes drop on the floor. Then he proceeds to lecture me for the next hour until past midnight, pausing only long enough to refill his glass. Tonight's inspiring Frank Sorensen lecture covers everything: the dangers of international communism, the brutality and depravity of the North Vietnamese, who love nothing better more than to torture and maim, the soulless assassination of the innocent village leaders by the Viet Cong guerrilla fighters, the gutless hippies, and the traitorous Pekinaks back in the States who are undermining support for the troops, the ungrateful punks like me who have everything handed to them on a silver platter and take for granted the freedoms and prosperity of Americans that people like him spend their lives defending and ensuring will come by taking on and taking out the dark forces in the world that those same ungrateful punks can't even begin to imagine exist but are all too real. By that point, he's really on a roll and driving his lecture home. He says he wishes he could just send me out into the field for a day with an army patrol on a search and destroy mission, because I'd know what real fear is and real courage and true patriotism, and understand that in a real world, the world he lives in and that I do, I just don't know yet, but one day I'm sure I'm going to find out. It comes down to just this: kill or be killed. He stops and looks at me expectantly. Well, what do you have to say for yourself now? It's been impressive verbal vomit, that's for sure, but I have nothing, and even if I did, what's the point? So instead I just say, Happy birthday, Dad, which isn't much of a comeback. Isn't a comeback at all. But at least it's true.